Welcome to Moving Through and Beyond, a podcast dedicated to sharing inspired journeys of redefining life, vision, and purpose after immense hardship and grief. My goal with this podcast is to give you hope and to let my guest journeys inspire you to make the choice to keep looking up. I'm your host, Carey Conley. Hi, everyone. This is Carey Conley. I'm your host of the Moving Through and Beyond podcast, and I am really so grateful that through my journey of being a speaker and a leader, I get to meet some really incredible other speakers in the motivational world and in leadership world. And I heard this gentleman speak at an event. It's been probably a year and a half ago now in Oklahoma City. And there was probably, Jeremie, like 12 speakers that day. And you were the one who really resonated with me the most. So this is Jeremie Kubicek, you guys. He's written so many books on leadership, co-founder of a company called Giant, which I will have him talk more about. When I was looking in your bio, you've launched over 20 businesses, Jeremie. I mean, that's crazy. I have like 3 spinning and going crazy.
Well, it's yeah, I'm a little bit out there in the way that my parents keep going, I wish you were just a plumber. We don't know we don't know what you do. Yeah, I create and start things. So that's what I do.
Very well, very successfully.
Well, thank you.
And truly one of the wisest speakers, now friend, you've helped me so much personally, which I want you to know. And I appreciate that. Just so wise when you deliver information, and it's a way that I've never heard it said before. So I just wanted you to know, I appreciate you.
I love it. I'm excited to be with you. And for all of you listening, I'm super excited just to maybe encourage a little bit and maybe give some perspective.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your journey. I know you're from Oklahoma, right?
Yeah. So my family has been in Oklahoma about 105 years, right? And we have a family farm that's 105 years old. And I was on that farm working, and that's the last place I wanted to be. So I graduated college and I moved to Russia, as far as you could possibly go. I lived in Moscow for a few years, started a few companies in the early 90s when I was 21 years old. And we started an economic school and 2 other companies, sold a couple of them, came back because of the Oklahoma City bombing. My father-in-law was in the bombing.
Oh, wow.
And it really shaped and changed the dynamics of our family. He survived, but lost most of his staff. So I came back to Oklahoma, which I didn't want to, and I ended up working. In fact, if you're in your 20s, it's a key phrase that my dad taught me. It was really good. It's like in your 20s, it's not what you do, it's who you work for that makes the biggest difference. Because you learn from people, you'll earn later. Focus on learning more than earning in your 20s. I think that's a key component. And that's what I did. Wow. And I worked for this amazing family called the Humphreys family, and they really trained me up. And then I went on to do a lot of things, worked for private equity, started 3 .coms, bought a bunch of businesses, sold a lot of companies, blah, 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 all before my accident, which we can go into in a minute. Yeah. And then I started Giant, and then moved to Atlanta, bought John Maxwell's companies years ago, and then built these brands called Catalyst, LeaderCast, and then moved to London and lived there for a few years, but all before moving back to our hometown of Oklahoma City. So that's a very fast synopsis of some years.
There's so many things that you just said that I think, especially young adults listening to, need to hear, Jeremie, is that you really just jumped all in doing what you wanted to do instead of probably what the culture tells them to do, right? I talk a lot about this, and so many people also talk about how we still have a system that is taking kids through it. You do this, and then you do that next, and then you get the good degree, and you go to work, and, you do the safe thing. And you did quite the opposite. And I think it scares a lot of people to even think about doing what you did.
Well, I have a thing with my kids. My wife and I decided at the age of 13, we're going to start treating them like adults, because really adolescence it's only been around for the last 50 years.
Wow.
And so when you think of it, it's like we keep kids to be kids far too long.
Yeah.
Insurance keeps them 26 years old, right?
Yeah.
So when our kids turned 15 in our family, you had to either work for someone full time at 15 with school, or you had to have started your own company. So my son started an auto detailing business. My daughter had a little video vignette business. And so each of them, they're really, and so they have 4 companies between the 3 of them, and they're all in. So the premise was, do you want to be a job creator or have a job? And
Hmm.
it's okay to have a job, but
Right.
even to know that's an option. So to your point, most 20 somethings, they don't know it's an option. The teenagers, they don't even know. And so I created a system for my kids, which is now a company called 6 Summers. My son took that and made it into a company, the system that I made for him. And it trains dads on how to train their kids on how to be entrepreneurs.
I love this so much. So the reason I now have 2 grandsons, as you know. The reason I moved to Oklahoma City was because of my daughter deciding to put roots down there, married an Okie boy, and I can't get them to think about moving to Arizona with me. But now I'm so aware of how much differently I would like to speak into those little boys. And not necessarily me, because I'm the grandma, I'm not the parent, as my daughter reminds me a lot. But just raising them with a whole different mentality on life. It's just so
Absolutely.
different.
And it's options. And so when people don't know that they don't experience things, I've lived in Russia, I've lived in London, I've traveled most of the world. Our business is in around 120 countries with Giant. And so I just see things, right? And so you have to experience it. But to your point, they don't know that they can. And so who says we can't, there's a prohibition that people put on themselves.
Right.
And it's really interesting. When you have the opportunities, most people don't know what to do with them.
Yeah. So are you working on bringing that into the 6 Summers program, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do with that to bring that into the mainstream? Do you have a plan? I'm sure you do.
Well, yeah. So let's make it unbelievably inexpensive. So we said for every school, it's $1,000, or church, it's $1,000 a year to license it
Okay.
for every dad. And then we equip the dads to create a game plan for their kids, and then a badge system for them to have experiences with their kids. So
Interesting.
it's really about the dads. It's not about the kids. It's about the dads and getting them to turn on their intentionality.
Right.
And so it's just 6summers.com, or you become a member for $100 a year. And so why wouldn't you?
Right.
And so therefore you have all the tools you need to train up your kids.
Right.
So yeah, we've got a game plan we're working on. It's so fun to do that with my son.
Yes, I can imagine. My story, as you know, losing my husband and my son to suicide the year after we lost my son, 3 years after my husband. This is now almost 6 years ago. My daughter and I co-authored a book together called Keep Looking Up. And when that happened, she and I started working together, started speaking together. And then she decided to start having babies. And so she's not doing much of that right now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fun. It's fun to work with your adult kids and see. And, really, when she and I work on things together, I like her to lead the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. She's just, we're alike a lot in similar ways, Jeremy, but also very different in ways which complement. She's very much more black and white than I am, which is great in decision making, right? So it's just great to work with your kids, especially if you can combine strengths or, balance them out. I love that.
It is so rewarding for sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned this earlier. I want to touch on this, that you had kind of a horrific accident how many years ago was it?
Well, I was young. So this is 2002.
Okay.
So, we've got, 20 years plus. So it changed my entire life, honestly, because,
Okay.
you hear this a lot. And when you go through any tragedy, you have an opportunity to reset and reframe or
Mm-hmm.
not.
Mm-hmm.
And we did. And so my wife and I were in Mexico in a hurricane, and we got stuck in a hurricane. And then on our way to get to indoors, right as the eye of the hurricane was on us, a drunk driver ran a red light and smashed us, and literally, broke 6 clean breaks of my ribs, 9 ribs fractured overall. Just horrific. Severed my intestines, was paralyzed from the waist down. All types of crazy things, and had multiple miracles and things that took place, and it literally changed the way that we view life.
Yeah.
and God and
Mm.
relationships and even just priorities. And I would say before then, I was probably a 20 something maker of happen is what I called myself, which was so dumb. But I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm going to do all of these things. And I did a lot of things, at a young age, but had this drive and ambition. And I think it was all out of insecurity and pride, honestly.
Mm.
And so, I had the opportunity to get to the end of my life. And my three questions was I your man? Was I a good husband? Was I a good dad? That was my three questions to
Mm.
God, right? And I got to see my life flash before my eyes. I got to actually die. I got to float above the car. I
Wow.
got to experience the near death experiences that you read about.
Yeah.
And they said I was gone for 4.5 minutes and came back into the car through, again, a number of miracles. That's the only way that we all could see it happen. And then I got to reset and I started Giant. Literally, I would just started Giant before we went down there. And I had the brand was big G, big I, big A, NT. And then when we got back, we changed the logo to a little I.
Mm.
And the whole idea was like, how do we do big things in a humble way?
Right.
And so it was almost like a resetting of life to go, how do I give myself away for other people
Yeah.
and help them call them up into those positions?
I don't know if you and I had talked about this, probably not, but about a year or so ago, I got introduced to an organization called Helping Parents Heal. Huge organization. The founder lives here in Arizona. We become friends. She has tens of thousands of parents all over the world that are in this group. And she has a convention that she does every other summer. And God divinely got me there at that convention last year because I heard about it very last minute. They did not have a ticket. They did not have a hotel room. And literally in 24 hours, she called me and said, we've got a ticket and a hotel room for you. I was like, okay, I'm supposed to be there. And there were a lot of people there on stage, Jeremy, that were talking about their near-death experiences.
Hmm.
And the reason they bring these people to grieving people like us is to help us understand how connected we still are to our kids,
Mm-hmm.
and how much they are still in the room and still working through us. And, they explained just seeing things, like you said, from a whole different perspective. And a lot of these people are science-based, like medical doctors that would never in a million years have said, yes, there's
Right.
another side.
Yeah.
There are people here. So
Yeah.
it's a gift that you are given. And I'm sure you know that. It's just amazing.
It really did. It changed, it just changed the way that you think about things. And so you're
Right.
like, all right, I have another life to live. How am I going to live it? Right.
Right.
And I wasn't a jerk. I just would say I was just ambitious.
Yeah.
So I'm still ambitious. It's still in me. It's a tendency of mine, but I
Yeah.
probably tampered down just a smidge.
Yeah. I remember you talking about the tendencies. I've started making my list of
Okay.
tendencies.
Yeah. Good.
I appreciate that about you. This giant training that you've mentioned a couple times, Jeremy, can you describe it
Yeah.
for me?
So, I was doing all of these big leadership events and had all these speakers, and we had owned John Maxwell's assets, and we had again all of these Pat Lencioni and content, and they're amazing people. Pat, Henry Cloud, great people, Jim Collins. But what I was learning was 20th century learning was kind of butts and seats selling books. So it
Mm-hmm.
was like big events, a lot of reading, a lot of bullets. And 21st century learning is not that way. It's
Right.
visual, and it needs to be concise. And so we started to create content and concepts on cocktail napkins, because when you teach it, you learn. So
Right.
the whole game is we're going to teach you things that you learn from other people. And so that's really what Giant is. We have about 80 tools, and this toolkit is designed to help people with emotional intelligence, that grow their self-awareness, to help them lead
Mm-hmm.
or be a team leader, be more effective. And so as we started to do the tools started to spread, because the tool is like a mirror. I can show you, Carey, here's what it's like to be on the other side of you. Do you see this? And the
Mm-hmm.
mirror is the bad guy. The mirror doesn't reflect judgment. The mirror reflects reality. We have to deal with the mirror.
Right.
And so that's the beauty of it. So what we did is we packaged our system up and we started to offer it to consultants and coaches and speakers, trainers, anyone in that space, counselors, and then they become certified. But we also were like, we don't want to create this massive certification that's so expensive. We want to build a community. So we made it, let's make it super inexpensive for professionals. So it's like $299 a month. And then they get to learn, and then they're part of the community. So we have like 950 giants, consultants around the world. And we want to get that number to about 3,000. But it's really simple. You jump in, you learn the tools, and you start making money off of that.
Yes.
And then you add it to your coaching business, consulting business, or you bring it inside and you become what we call a catalyst. And then you're an internal champion and you take the tools and start using it with your own team. And that's $199 a month. So we thought, let's just make everything so simple that why would you not?
Right.
And that's really been a successful strategy because we have a lot of people that are coming in. So that's at giantworldwide.com. It's really easy to look at.
Yeah, I've been the recipient of pieces of that through the organization that I got involved in called SALT in Oklahoma City. And very eye-opening from a receiving end to see what kind of leader you are and how to work together with different leadership styles. And I think it's so important, again, that I'm really going to say this for young adults to know that about yourself early on. The event that you invited me to, it was last week or the week before. I loved how you talked so much about understanding that leadership is all about how you're leading yourself first and the impact that you're attracting.
Mm-hmm. You can't give what you don't possess.
Right.
And so all of our content, and so for a lot of people may not have heard of Giant, but they might have heard of the 5 voices or the 5 gears or 100X leader or the Peace Index. But these are all content pieces, but they're all designed to look at the mirror first.
Yeah.
Because most leadership is the reason leadership doesn't work, the reason that churches have a hard time, or is called hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And if the leader, if your boss tells you to do something, but they're not doing it, then you're like, well, it'd be nice if you did it first. Right.
Right.
So when you do give what you possess and people see that you're self-aware or you're responsive or you're growing, then they're going to listen to you.
Right.
Just human nature.
Yes. Yeah, it was definitely giving me a lot to think about, especially in the role I'm in. And again, the young adult community that I want to build, because I know that they won't follow me, especially as old as I am, if I'm not walking my talk and healing my own stuff and being a better leader. And so you touched on this, and I asked you if you would explain the Peace Index, because you did this with me it was very impromptu in our meeting. I had no idea we were going to go there. But you know that it's made a big shift in me. So I wanted you to explain what that is.
Yeah. So every single person, when I'm with people, what I'm looking for is, where's the healing? What needs to get taken out of them? What needs to be called up inside of them? Where do they need to be? It's usually one of those 3 areas. So that's a secret that I'm giving away for free here to any of the listeners. When you're with people, think about it. What's the healing in that person? So then the tool we use, one of the tools, we have multiple tools for that, but one of them is called the Peace Index. And so the Peace Index is 5 simple assessments, and you put them all together. So the first one is purpose. So imagine if I asked you how strong, how good do you feel it? How at peace are you with your purpose? 1 through 100, and 100 is the highest level. So purpose is, how much is what you're doing, how much does it match who you are?
Right.
And that's purpose. And right now I'm probably at a 90. Last week I was probably at 85. I've been as high as a 95. And it goes up and down every single week,
right?
Maybe even day, depending on what you're doing or who you're around. So if you want to play the game, take your calculator out right now and give yourself a number, 1 through 100. How's your purpose right now, Carey?
I'd say it's a 90, okay. 90%.
Good. All right. Well, I'll use yours. We'll play that game.
Okay, so great. Just put me in the hot seat here, Jeremie, because you know where we're going with this.
So the next one is people. How
Mm-hmm.
good do you feel about the people? How at peace are you with the people in your life?
Mm.
And these aren't your favorite people. These are the top 10 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
So your neighbors, your coworkers, your boss, your family, your kids, but it's not like my best friend from ages past. Like, no, these are your top 10 people that you spend the most time with.
Yep.
So where are you at, Carey, on your people right now?
I'd say 80%.
Okay, 80%. All right. And the number's subjective.
Yep.
Someone's 80 might be someone else's 74, but
Sure.
at least you know what it is. The next one is your personal health. That's simple: mental, physical, spiritual. It's the culmination of all three. 1 through 100. What number? Where are you at, Carey?
In spiritual, I'd say 75%.
Okay, all three of those together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yep. So 75. All right. So now we've got provision. Provision is now. This is very. You're on your own podcast here, and for those listening, provision is how at peace are you with your earnings? Do you have what you need to live the life that you have? It says not, do you have what you want? Needs and wants are different.
Yeah.
I want a Aston Martin and I want a house in, Switzerland. Different than, do you have a car? Do you have food? Do you have what you need?
Right.
Where's your provision right now?
I'd say 95%.
Okay, there you go. So then the last one is then place. And place is, how good do you feel about your house, your neighborhood, your community, or your apartment, wherever it is, your city, your region, and also your office space, like your office. How good do you feel about your office as a whole? So what number would you say you're at?
At the moment, I'd say 10%, but I'm working on that.
Wow, that's like really low. I wasn't expecting that. So then you add all of them up and then you get your number and then you divide by 5.
Yep.
And that is a 70% overall.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, if your place changes, just that one, it'll affect all of them because you were scoring in the 80s and some in the 90s. So you probably would have been an average of 85 if you changed that one place.
Right.
So that's how you play the game. And you do this. What's great about the Peace Index is it's a really great tool to be able to use with your kids or friends. Teenagers love it. It's simple, but it's objective language. It's not drama. So I'm not going, hey, Carey, how are you? No, really? No, come on. There's something else there. How are you really? And people feel like you're pushing. Just asking the Peace Index, you're going to find out what's the issue.
Yeah.
And that's what I did with you because I could sense it. I could sense there was something of healing that needed to take place.
Right.
And therefore, the Peace Index allowed me to go, okay, place. Now, we did it twice. And in both times, place is still the issue. So then it gives me the ability to challenge you.
Right.
If you know that I'm for you, and then call you up to go, hey, is it going to get better? Will this be here last year or next year? Will this be the same number?
Right.
And are you satisfied with that?
Yeah.
And
I think it's so eye-opening that what you just said a minute ago, Jeremie, about that one thing. If you don't work on that one thing, it affects everything else. And until you work on improving that one thing, it becomes the top priority. For me, when I left you that day, I knew I needed to change it, but it became like, okay, this is non-negotiable. Like this became everything above and beyond everything else. Because if I don't fix that, I can't be effective in my purpose with my people. All those other things get affected. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the Peace Index, and in it, and then it's a book you can find on Amazon. It's easy, but if you want to go deeper in each category, there's each chapter. If your purpose is off, there's a purpose assessment. There's a people assessment. You actually assess people, and you got to be really careful because you can't show anyone that list,
right?
Or your or your peace level goes down if they see that list. But what it was really helpful is the big idea is this in the book is like I was trying to create something to manage my emotions so that other people didn't manage my emotions.
I gotcha.
And that's the big aha. How can you manage your own emotions so that other people don't have to manage your
Yeah.
emotions? And you need to know where you're off and why you're off.
Yeah.
And if you do, then you can control your controllables. You're like, okay, it's my place. And then what you've done is you've like actually tested it. Is it really my place? And you're like, it really, really is.
It really, really is. Yeah.
Okay, therefore, what are you going to do about that? You can control it. There's no uncontrollables. There's no, it's a hassle. There's your daughter. There's your grandkids. There's real factors involved. But if you're not alive, they're not going to be alive.
Right. And it's just been so eye-opening. And I've now seen you do this piece index 2 or 3 times. And every time you do it, it just solidifies, right? And you also just said something I think is super important that I've said many, many times in leadership is learning how to manage emotion. I heard that from a top leader in another company I was involved with many years ago, Jeremie, and she stood up and she said, one of the biggest factors of a good leader is learning how to manage emotion. And it just really hit me. And I could tell all the other people in the room were like, oh.
That's my issue. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because, and so the way I do it is I actually have a system for it. I've been doing it this week. I've had a couple of really tough weeks, just a lot on. And so I've had a little bit of whining coming back in. And I know that about myself. That's a tendency.
Yeah.
And so I have been working to stop it. And so the way I do is I do a call-up session every morning. I tried it this morning. I was a little tired, honestly. But I do this little call-up session and remind myself who I am. But then every day at 5:30, I do an examine process where I look at my day and like, what was good? And then the second thing was, where was I off? Where was I not at peace today?
Right.
And what I try to do is I try to analyze that down and to find out what is it exactly? Is it me or is it someone else? Usually it's me. And then I find out what my tendency is. And then I kind of play private investigator. When does it happen? Why is it happening? What am I going to do about it? And how do I trade up to a better action? And it's been surprisingly powerful for me in my life because now I don't whine. I'm like, yeah, I'm dissatisfied with X or Y.
Right.
But when I know I'm dissatisfied, I'm like, what is it I want again? What's my vision? Now I can go do something about it.
Right.
Versus anyone around me hearing my whining, complaining, blaming or frustration.
Right.
It's like I actually can do something about it.
Yeah.
So that's what I like to do. I like to help people solve issues in themselves. So
yeah, I love that because this is, adulting. This is like taking responsibility for knowing, like me, I can change this situation, Jeremie, right? Yeah. I complained a lot about it and to a lot of people. Everybody knows. But it came a point where especially my daughter's like, okay, this is not going to work. I want you to be happy. And we can make this work. And so I just think I love how you do the examine at the end of every day. Where was I off? Why was I off? What triggered that?
Yep.
Right? Owning it because it's my trigger.
Yep.
Taking responsibility for it and then asking, how can I change this and do better? And I think so many times some people just want to keep doing the whining and the blaming, and it's all the outside world's problem. It's not me.
So. And then if you're the secret is you can't let other people's lack of peace affect your level of peace. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, if you're not aware of yourself, you may actually be lowering other people's peace index.
Right.
Because of your own lack of it, 10%, it's going to affect other people.
Sure.
Which is then going to affect their perception of you and your influence with them.
Right.
So moving and working on place is actually a influence rebuilder.
Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. So good, Jeremie. Like I said, you are one of the wisest men I've ever met. And just everything you say just really resonates with me in the way that you deliver it. So I thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, the goal, thank you for that. And that's very kind. But I think that the goal is, how do you become the most alive?
Right.
And when you're not alive, it's sure hard to help other people come alive.
I agree.
Because you can't give what you don't possess.
Right.
And so you have to be filled up. I'm a big believer in overflow and you really truly experience your best days when you're overflowing with life for other people.
Yeah.
Most people never experience overflow. And I think that's a big spiritual component. I think there's a big, part of just learning to give yourself away, learning how to enjoy and be content. And it's hard for a lot of us.
Right.
I have a hard time with it.
Yep.
But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you so much. Is there one last piece of encouragement you might want to give a young adult right now that just really wants to live their best life? What would you tell them?
Yeah, so I think it's really, you have the ability to create vision, and I'm a big believer in vision. And what happens with people with vision is sometimes they have this weighted cloud that sits on their shoulder, and it's the stress of the world, and they can't see the future because of all the negativity or stress or negative self-talk. And so you've got to mitigate weighted cloud so you can see the vision. And then at the same time, if you have this cloud around you, you may go to your parents or to other 20-somethings like, what do you think I should do? And then it's called encroaching vision, their vision for your life.
Right.
And what I find is I ended up counseling a lot of them in their 50s who never did the work in their 20s and 30s to find out what do you really want?
Yeah.
So you've been doing this job because you thought your dad wanted you to, or you've been doing this because your wife said you were good at it, or you took this job because in college you thought that's where you could make the most amount of money.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not vision. So I would encourage people to find your vision. What is it you want? What makes you come most alive? What were you made to do?
Love that. That's exactly what I stand on. So I appreciate you ending with that. I appreciate your time so much, Jeremie, in this relationship. Yeah. And how can people find out more about you, about Giant? Where do you want them to go?
Yeah, well, there's lots. That's the problem when you have a lot of businesses. GiantWorldwide.com is if you wanted to find out about Giant, to be a consultant or bring it into your company. Or just me. I have a weird last name, but you'll probably put it in your show notes.
I will.
Jeremie Kubicek. It's Jeremie with an IE, so it's kind of weird. JeremieKubicek.com. And then if you are a dad and you were like, hey, I want this for my kids, it's sixsummers.com. It's a really cool system.
I love that. I can't wait to share that. So thank you, Jeremie. I appreciate your time so much.
You got it. Great to be with you. Can't wait to hear the results of your move.
Yeah, thank you. You'll be the first to know. Well, thanks, everybody. This is Carey, your host of Moving Through and Beyond, and I'm here to just keep reminding you to keep looking up. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please share it with a friend or a family member. In order to be successful on this mission, I can't do it alone. Connect with me at www.careyconley.com, and don't forget to sign up for my weekly Do It On Purpose newsletter. Let's build this life-giving vision movement together to end this epidemic, save lives, and create purpose.